everyone, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we will be looking at arrays in JavaScript. So an array simply allows us to store several pieces of data in any place, and each value in an array has an index. We touched a bit on indexing earlier when we were looking at strings, so now we'll be going more in depth on indexes in JavaScript. Now, an index is simply a reference in memory address, and similar to what we did earlier when we looked at strings, an index in an array starts from 0. Well, in JavaScript overall we use a zero-based indexing system, so every time we look at indexing, we will note that it always starts from 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so on. So yeah, and the last element in an array is always less than 1 from the length, or the last index in an array is always less than 1 from the length. And this should be a very familiar concept, especially since we looked at string.length, where we found the length of a string. We use a dot length minus 1 to get the last index. So it's the same concept here with arrays, because remember we use a zero-based indexing system. So let's say we have 6 elements in an array. The length would be 6, but the last index would be 5, because we start counting from 0 in terms of indexing, but with length it's always from 1 and up. Okay, so I think that should pretty cover that aspect as sort of a refresher. So to add to that, arrays also can contain different data types and duplicate data. So let's say, for example, we have the numerical value or the number value 2 or even 5, or really any value. We can store that value over or duplicate times, multiple times within an array, and we can store different values such as strings, booleans, numbers, objects, and so on and so forth. We can even store an array within an array, but we'll get to that later on. So how do we create an empty array? So in JavaScript there are different ways to create an arrays. I will go over them, but for purposes of this specific section or this specific video, we will be creating an array using square brackets, and it's very common to use the const keyword to create an array instead of let to declare the array variable. So using square brackets, we would say const. We name our variable, in this case is r, short for array, and we use the square brackets, and we would have an empty array. So if we console log r, we should return an empty array. So for this video, I'm actually going to use CodePen instead of running Node in my VS Code terminal, in my VS Code integrated terminal. So I'll go to Google, and you can just type in codepen.io and open a new pen, and you will be greeted with a HTML, a CSS, and a JavaScript window. I'll just paste my job. Before I do that, I'm navigating here to my console, opening up the console and dragging it up just so you can see, and then I'll go back here. I'll paste this. So we're declaring the array, and it returns an empty array within the console. So you guys can practice on CodePen as well. Just open a new pen and create an account, sign up if you want to, and practice your JavaScript from here. Of course, you can also practice in your browser window by just right-clicking or inspecting the window and then navigating to the console and start typing away your JavaScript code. So yeah, this is how we create an empty array within JavaScript. Now I'm just going to show you a few more examples. So here we have an array with different data types. We have numbers, and we have one string, so number 1, 2, and 4. However, string banana. Notice how each element in an array is separated by commas. If you don't put a comma, it will be counted as one, or as one single element. So we use commas to separate them. and if we console log this, it should return 1, 2, banana, and 4 within our console. So let me just go here and clear this, and we should see an array be returning 1, 2, banana, and 4. And here it is, 1, 2, banana, and 4. Good. So let me clear here too, and here we have an array with a string, which is my name, a number 150, the Boolean value of true, and we have an object that stores a key value pair. Now don't get confused by objects. We haven't touched on them yet, but surely we will touch on them in the future. So yeah, just keep that in mind for now. So let me just show you guys how this would look in the console as well. So let me navigate here to CodePen, and I'll go like so, and we see the array being returned with the object inside. Okay, all right, that should be it for looking at what an array is. And yeah, okay, so now we'll be looking at, oops, I actually spelled this wrong, short typo. So now we'll be looking at what are nested arrays, right? And nested arrays in JavaScript are simply defined as an array within another array, and nested arrays are called multi-dimensional arrays. And to do that, we simply just we declare an array. Let me just show you let me show you from scratch instead of doing that. So I'm actually using Markdown to write this. So const r equal to, then we have object, we have an array. So here we have an empty array, and within that array we want another array, right? So let's say this is our first array, and I'm just gonna do what I did up there. So here we have my name, comma, remember commas are very important, and then that will be the first array inside this multi-dimensional or nested array, and then to separate it from the next array we use a comma, and then we simply add another array. This array can have as much values as we want, but for our purposes let's just leave it as so. So let me just delete this just so you guys could see what I did. And yeah, here we have a multi-dimensional or a nested array. And next up we'll be looking at how to access array data. So in accessing array and the data of an array in JavaScript, we use its index, and to use the index we use bracket notation. So let's say we have an array called myArray or myAr, and we want to access the data from myArray and return that to our array, right? So we would simply use bracket notation. So we say myAr, again square brackets, and we want to find the value that's at index 0, and because we use a 0-based indexing system we start counting from 0. So the value at index 0 is actually 1. So if we log this in our console, it should return the value of 1. So let me just go back to CodePen, make sure I copied that correctly, and I paste this, and it should return 1. And here we go, we see it returns the value of 1. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it about accessing array data for now. Next up we will be looking at modifying array data. modify the data of an array in JavaScript, we use indexing, no surprise there. And we tried to do this earlier when looking at string immutability, but because strings are immutable, meaning the value of the index cannot change, it wasn't possible. However, arrays on the other hand, they are modifiable or mutable, if you will. So in order to do this, we must declare an array, then indicate the index position or the value at the index that we want to be changed, then initialize it with a new value. And let me just walk you through that. So let me scroll down a bit. So we have an array which contains 3 elements, 1, 2, and 3, and we want to modify the value that is at index 0. So we say my array, and we're targeting index 0, and then we want to change that value to 45. So if we then console log my array, it should return 45, 2, and 3. So let me just open this up, and it should return an array with 45, 2, and 3. And there we go. We see an array being returned with 45, 2, and 3 because we're simply targeting the value of my array at the index at. We're targeting the value at the index of 0 in my array, which is 1, and then we're changing it, or we're reassigning that value to 45 using the assignment operator here. Okay. Now other examples, we have a numbers array, numbers from 1 to 5, and we're changing the value at index 0, which is 1 to 10, and then changing the value at index 1, which is 2 to 20. So if we do a console log of this numbers array, it should return 10, 20, 3, 4, and 5. So for teaching purposes, we navigate to CodePen and we run this, and it should return 10, 20, 3, 4, and 5. And we have another array, this time using countries. So I'm just gonna log this out, and don't forget to practice, guys. That's what's going to make you a good developer, or really that's what's going to make you understand JavaScript. So you have to practice, and you will get it. Well, let me just go console log. I forgot to do console log. And what do we want to console log? Countries. And it should pop up with Bahamas in the first. Yes, so Bahamas, Bonaire, Canada, France, and Africa. Yeah, that works. Okay, and next up we'll be looking at accessing nested array data. So in accessing nested array data, we will be using index, which again should be no surprise to us at this point. And we do this again by using the bracket notation, right? So when accessing data from a nested or a multidimensional array, we're going to use multiple indexes. So the first notation should ideally point to the index of the array that you want to target, and the second notation points to the element within that array that you are targeting. So let's say we have the array that we did earlier containing 2 arrays. Oh, it's a different array, sorry. So we have a multidimensional array containing 2 different arrays. First one has 2 values, the second one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values, and we're declaring a new array, which is our array, and that's going to be equal to, it's going to be equal to second array. We're pointing to the second array because we're using index 1. Again, the first array would have an index value, of 0 because we start counting from 0. So the second array logically will have an index of 1. So that's what this first notation here points to this array. And then the second notation points to the value or the index value of an element in the array that the first notation points. And because our first notation points to the second array, the 0 will also point to the first element in that second array. So it should return the number value of 1. And for proof, let us navigate to our CodePen console and run this. And here we have it returning 1. So that's pretty much it when it comes to accessing nested array data. I hope this video was helpful, and stay tuned for part 2 where we will go over 5 more concepts in the different array methods that are available to us within JavaScript. Until then, see you soon.